Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Life Worth Living by Monica Mccallan, narrated by Lori Prince. Chapter 1. Nora was on her feet the second the meeting ended. Curious brown eyes caught hers as Gray Ferris loitered in the conference room but made no move toward Nora. At least the woman had some sense. Nora's heels clicked across the hardwood floors, carrying her out of the meeting space and through the open floor plan that made up the Philly Fines real estate office. The situation Nora found herself in was truly her own personal version of hell. Why Cynthia wanted to torture her was unclear, but it was also irrelevant. An explanation wouldn't change the fact that her boss had just announced in front of their 10-person company that Gray would also be going on the trip. If there was ever a time for takebacks... Storming into her boss's office, she didn't let out a breath until she felt the soft thud of the door. "Seriously, Cynthia? What was that about?" If Cynthia Lennox, her boss, mentor, and sometimes friend, was surprised to find Nora in her office, she didn't let on. She was already seated at her desk, peering down at her computer through glasses she wore when staring at a screen. Her blonde hair had streaks of silver, the only sign that she was on the other side of 50. The sleeveless navy wrap dress she wore hugged her frame, and long toned arms were balanced on the edge of her desk. "What was what about? Also, I like that jacket," Cynthia said with an appraising look, brown eyes now focused on Nora. Nora refused to fidget. Purposefully, she walked over to the window that overlooked their Philadelphia office on Frankfort Avenue. She wouldn't give Cynthia the satisfaction of watching her squirm. "Don't flatter me. Glad you're getting some use out of it now," Cynthia said, giving her jacket another appraising stare. "You won't need it when you're funnin' and sunnin'. Why is Gray going on this trip?" There was no point in prolonging the inevitable. This year, partly to celebrate the company's 5-year anniversary, the real estate agency had instituted an all-expenses-paid trip to Bermuda for the agent with the highest value in home sales. Nora had known since it was announced she'd be the winner, but hey, a little healthy competition never hurt. "Because she won too?" Had to be the most half-assed answer she'd ever heard come from her boss's mouth. She hoped that Cynthia could see the clench in her jaw. Nora ran her hands over her lapels, smoothing the navy garment before fiddling with a gold button. It was a nice jacket. At least Cynthia recognized that, even if she was intent on driving Nora insane. Except those weren't the rules. It was supposed to be one person going on this trip, and now it's 2. For some bullshit category that I didn't even know existed until you announced it at the meeting. A quick look at Cynthia was all it took to know that she was loving every second of this. Gray's closed more hard sells than anyone else at the company. More deals, in fact. She may not be putting up your sales profit numbers, but she's been invaluable in making connections within the city and bringing us a bigger client base. Nora turned around and squared her shoulders, standing ramrod straight. This was bullshit, and they both knew it. Whether Cynthia was willing to admit it remained to be seen. "So she gets rewarded for low numbers and being good at putting lipstick on a pig?" Cynthia's downturned lips told Nora she'd come close to offending her, but they quickly tipped back up into a vibrant smile. "If you want to put it crudely. And if you don't, she's made a lot of clients very happy these last few months. That's not nothing." "So have I," Nora said, needlessly. They both knew she was inarguably the strongest agent at Philly Fines, the real estate agency Cynthia had founded 5 years ago. Nora had been by her side since the beginning. "Which is exactly why I wanted to recognize you both." Cynthia's nod when she spoke made it seem like the conversation was done. Too bad Nora wasn't finished. She hadn't been on a vacation in years. Granted, it was her own fault, but that still didn't temper the sting of being stuck with some wide-eyed newbie on what should be a relaxing, private vacation. Because the truth was, she didn't want to socialize. Hell, she didn't know if she remembered how to string a coherent sentence together with the sole purpose of getting to know someone if it wasn't work-related. And if she was listing her grievances, she didn't want to have to entertain a human being more closely aligned in personality to a golden retriever than a person. All she wanted to do was get drunk on the beach at her all-inclusive resort and maybe read some smutty romance novels. You could have given me a heads up. Except that once she got the words out, she deflated. Cynthia leaned back against her desk and crossed her arms. And what would you have done? Withdrawn from contention? Or thrown your last few deals to lose? Her eyes narrowed. I'd never lose on purpose. I know that. I just don't understand why you did this. Why couldn't we get separate trips if you were going to pick two winners? Cynthia laughed, a light but rich sound that told her exactly what she thought about Nora's irrefutable point. It's not some conspiracy, Nora. I don't have a personal assistant. It was just easier to do everything together. 2 flights, 2 hotel rooms, 2 people on the excursions. Oh, good. The anger was back, hot and itchy like her skin was too tight. She was already feeling trapped, and the trip hadn't even happened yet. Excuse me? Excursions? She'd said, indignantly. When she couldn't stop herself, she added, I hope they're refundable. Cynthia studied her. You're acting like I'm trying to send you to a monastery for a month on a silent retreat. I booked you a damn boat for the day. That's it. In all her years working with Cynthia, Nora had only ever seen her truly angry once. She wondered if she was about to double that record. And God, she wished she could rein it in. No one beyond the door to Cynthia's office would likely believe what a brat she was behaving like right now. Sure, she was rigid, and maybe a little bit domineering. But petulant? Not a chance. She didn't have to get her way because she paved the way. In sales, in effort, in sheer determination to be the best. But she'd been looking forward to this vacation, finding her best laid plans completely tipped on their side and stomped on in the most unexpected way, had all her perfectly calculated thoughts swirling around chaotically. She was on edge, and it was showing. Nora could feel the heat creeping up her neck and splotching scarlet on her cheeks. But she wouldn't back down on this. She couldn't. Cynthia gave her a look of genuine concern, her brows drawn together. Are you okay? Is this really about the trip? She nodded her head quickly. The other parts of her life, the ones that hadn't worked out, had been shoved in a box years ago. Then she'd put a lid on it, duct-taped it, thrown it into the Mariana Trench. Cynthia pulled Nora's attention back from chewing on that thought for any longer than she had to. I know that you and Gray aren't the best of friends, but it's not like I'm sending you with Julian. Cynthia laughed when Nora's nose scrunched up in aversion. As if he'd have the numbers, regardless of how you slice your wackadoodle criteria. Nora, you have always been a leader on this team because of your hard work and drive. You're one of the most talented, dogged agents that I know. It's one of the reasons you will have a place on this team as long as you want it. Classy of Cynthia to ignore the wackadoodle comment and compliment her on top of it, which only served to further darken the warm splotches on Nora's cheeks. I appreciate you saying that. But with that being said, Cynthia held Nora's stare and clasped her hands together on her lap. She looked like a disappointed parent. It was a look Nora had seen often growing up, whether deserved or not. She was suddenly feeling like there wasn't enough duct tape in the world to box away her problems. Still, she'd done a respectable job the last 5 years, if she'd said so herself. And considering she didn't ask for anyone else's opinion, save Cynthia's from time to time, she was the judge, jury, and executioner of her own life these days. "Just say it," Nora muttered. "Your attitude as of late has been lacking." "What? So you're allowed to make jokes about Julian, but I'm not?" She doubted the rest of the office knew how funny she could be. Cynthia pushed her fingers against the bridge of her nose and sighed. "That's not the point I'm making, and you know it." Nora sulked over to the small leather sofa in the office's seating area and threw herself down on it. "It should be. He heats his fish up in the communal microwave. Who does that?" She paused for dramatic effect and crossed her legs. "He's a psychopath." Cynthia let out another one of her vibrant laughs, and Nora could see a hint of the tension in Cynthia's shoulders rolling away. She hated when her boss was frustrated with her, but she couldn't help it. Why was everyone so oblivious to social mores? Do great work. Go home. No need to be besties with your colleagues. She didn't want to know about Trent's fantasy football league, and she'd rather die than join it, as she'd said in much kinder words, probably for the last 3 years in a row. As if it mattered what Callie's children had said or done in some sugar-induced fit of mania the past weekend. Kelvin couldn't understand that she wouldn't be caught dead at a rooftop patio with him for happy hour, with kids who looked like they weren't old enough to drink. Some days she felt like she was 35 going on 60. But that wasn't any of Kelvin's business either. Grant and Tamara and Sage and Kelsey had all tried to build similar bridges with her during their time at the company, but none of them had made it through. Some got the hint easier than others. The ones that didn't got a little hurt after a while at her unwillingness to be anything other than ambivalent coworkers with them. But they got over it eventually. The world didn't stop spinning because she refused to stay for a post-work cocktail lesson, or because she took her Friday morning waffle from the waffle bar to her desk and ate in silence while looking over her daily schedule. And then there was Gray. She'd been with Billy Fines for about a year, the newest member of the team. She'd caught Nora on an especially bad day for their first run-in. Nora meant that literally. Coming around a corner, Nora had been surviving on about 2 hours of fitful sleep and late to a client appointment when their paths had crossed. It wasn't hard to guess how it had played out. Maybe Nora had said some words that weren't the nicest, and there'd been a moment when Gray's terrified eyes had flashed with hurt. But they'd gotten over it. Nora never brought up how she could still remember the coffee as it had soaked into her skin, sticky and pungent. And when Gray had brought her cookies the day after to apologize for ruining Nora's favorite blouse, not that Gray could have known that, she'd even accepted them with a tepid smile. So everything was fine. Gray had given Nora a wide berth since then, though she seemed to ham it up with the rest of the office. Nora was sure that Gray, with her bubbly enthusiasm, had already formed lifelong friendships with each and every other person on the team. Well, this pin wasn't going to be knocked down by the bowling ball of charm that was Gray Ferris anytime soon. Nora knew that with the same surety she'd known that the trip to Bermuda was hers. Cynthia's voice cut through Nora's mental walk through the office and all of its strange inhabitants. "Did you hear me?" Nora blinked once, then again. She doubted that Cynthia had been wholeheartedly agreeing with her about Julian's psychopathy. Her boss had some restraint. "Can you repeat what you said?" "Unless it was to further chastise me for my behavior, in which case That message was already received loud and clear, she said weakly. Cynthia smiled before relaxing back against the edge of her desk. I wasn't going to mention this until after the trip, but given your response, I figured we'd better discuss it now. She sat up a little straighter against the soft leather, her lower back twinging. Her 6 a.m. yoga classes weren't improving her posture like she'd hoped. Discuss what? The company's been doing well. That's always good to hear. Cynthia nodded in agreement. So well, in fact, that I'm considering restructuring some things as we continue to grow. That caught Nora's attention. She liked how things were. She liked her autonomy. She liked that she knew everyone and that, more importantly, they'd all been trained to leave her alone. What things? I'm splitting the company into 2 teams. I'll lead one, and someone will become the senior agent on the other. I'm in a difficult position, though. Nora picked at a piece of lint on her pants and ignored the way her throat constricted. She was good at ignoring lots of things. And why's that? It hurt to push the words out. Because you're the best agent I have. But your people skills, at least as far as coworkers go, leave something to be desired. Based on your sales, you're a shoo-in if you want it. But based on soft skills... Cynthia let her words die out with a shrug. They both knew she didn't need to say the rest out loud. So you're saying that I could possibly lead a team if I wanted, but you don't have a lot of confidence that they wouldn't all quit on the spot when they found out they report to me? In a nutshell, yes, Cynthia said. Nora could feel Cynthia watching her, studying Nora's expression to see how she was absorbing this information. She looked up and met Cynthia with a determined stare. Why are you telling me this? It's your decision. Because I'm trying to give you agency. I know you don't want to be friends with your coworkers after... Well, Cynthia stilled and schooled her with a look before her stare softened. Anyway, past experiences aside, I'm unsure if you actually want to lead them, teach them, support them. I'm not sure they'd like that. If that wasn't an honest statement, Nora didn't know what was. No one was ever going to vote her most outgoing in the Philly Fines yearbook, and she'd spent years making it this way. Annoyance simmered just below the surface that she even cared, and she tempered it with an indignant huff. Would you like it? Cynthia asked, as though she were reading her mind. Nora hated that the scars of her past experiences hadn't lessened over time. Instead, they'd hardened her into something, like they'd been etched across her body so deeply they'd formed an armor over her skin. I don't know, she answered honestly. Well, maybe this trip can be a first step in figuring that out. Building bridges, learning to communicate, understanding what the newest person on the team has experienced in the last year after coming to work here. I think it could give you a new perspective on things, and hopefully help you come to a decision. So you're turning my prize into a work trip? Her half-decade-long default had been sardonic bitchiness, and in this moment she couldn't have turned it off if she'd wanted to. Cynthia rolled her eyes. Not if you don't want it to be. And even then, these are all great skills to have regardless. Was this all some kind of weird setup? Cynthia shook her head. No, Gray has truly earned this trip. She's breathed new life into the company over the last year, not that you've bothered to notice. That one stung a little. Nora spent as little time in the office as she could, mostly shuttling herself between client appointments and keeping her schedule as packed as possible. It wasn't just to avoid her coworkers, but it was absolutely an added benefit. She took a few seconds to compose herself, letting out a soft, deep exhale. It didn't have the desired effect. "When are you planning on making this decision, or rolling the new structure out?" Cynthia smiled. "I want to get things set up in the new year and have the two arms running smoothly by the time sales pick up in the spring." Nora did some quick mental math. "That's, like, 4 or 5 months away." "I know. I won't be announcing it to the rest of the team for a few months anyway, so it will be business as usual for everyone else." "And for me?" She could hear the strain from her own uncertainty laced through her tone. She'd never admit it, but she wanted Cynthia to tell her what to do. "Well, if you want the job, you know who you need to impress." "You?" Nora asked hopefully. Cynthia pointed through the glass panel on her door to the open concept office. "Them." Nora could practically smell the microwaved fish from here. "So," Cynthia continued with finality, "take your vacation. Have a wonderful time. Maybe learn to be a team player. And when you come back, you can decide if you want to invest time in becoming a more ingrained member of this team, with the eventual goal to lead part of it." Nora sat there, helpless to come up with another argument that would put her life back to the way it had been 15 minutes ago. "Just that simple?" "Life is nothing more than what we make of it," Cynthia said, walking over and opening her office door. Dismissed, and feeling more than a little dressed down, Nora stood up and ran her hands down her blazer. The unhelpful lesson she took away from her conversation with Cynthia was that she should be more careful about what she wished for. Because when she walked out of Cynthia's office, being stuck on a tropical island with Gray Ferris for a week was suddenly the least of her worries. Chapter 2. "Nora did not look happy earlier this morning when you were announced as a winner," Kelsey said quietly, at least for her, as they fixed their early afternoon coffees. Gray had 2 showings later in the afternoon, both close by. Fishtown was a hotbed of activity lately, and her office being located where she lived was just an added bonus. She didn't even mind that it was a few miles outside the hustle of Center City. She loved the mostly residential area, with its own main drag that had started to swell with a number of bars, restaurants, and stores over the last few years. She said absently, focused on stirring in her oat milk until the coffee was the perfect soft chocolate color she loved. She knew exactly what Kelsey was implying, and she was mostly surprised her coworker had managed to keep that to herself all morning. Not that Gray had been around to be on the receiving end of Kelsey's Spanish Inquisition. After their all-hands meeting, she'd schlepped down to South Philly, over to Brewery Town, and then to West Philly to show new clients a few prospective houses at each location. But, truthfully, she'd only been back for about 10 minutes, so maybe Kelsey didn't deserve as much credit as she was giving her. "I mean, I thought she was going to have a meltdown. Did you see how she snuck into Cynthia's office? They were in there for a while." Gray shrugged, the ends of her hair grazing the tips of her shoulders. "Honestly, I didn't. I had to run right out after the meeting to get to my appointments." Gray tried not to gossip. She would chat, shoot the breeze, ham it up, sure. But she always made sure to focus her questions on the person she was talking to, instead of them both talking about someone else. Especially when it came to Kelsey. "Well, all I have to say is good luck on your likely not-so-relaxing vacation." Gray picked up her coffee to blow on it before placating Kelsey. "I'm sure it'll be fine." Long blonde hair almost dipped into Gray's coffee cup as Kelsey shot a furtive look past the kitchen area and into the open office beyond. "She's intolerable. She's a good agent. There's a reason she won the trip, too." Kelsey leaned in conspiratorially, eyes narrowed. Gray braced for whatever mean jab was coming. "Good enough to act like a complete bitch to everyone?" "It's not like any of us really know her," Gray said, not exactly sure why she was coming to Nora's defense, with the exception of common decency. It's not like Nora had made Gray's life any easier than the rest of the team, but still, she didn't think it was fair to badmouth someone if they weren't there to defend themselves. She knew what it was like to have people talk around you instead of to you. How quickly the office gossip grapevine took on a life of its own. She didn't wish it on anyone. "Because she acts like we all have a communicable disease," Kelsey retorted. "I can't believe she closes so many deals. Does she morph into a completely different person with clients?" "I don't know, you should ask her," Gray deadpanned, before taking a long sip of her coffee and then staring at Kelsey over the rim of the cup. The conversation about Nora Gallagher always came up eventually when Gray was out for a night with her coworkers. She never participated, but Nora was almost mythical at this point in her refusal to engage with the rest of the team. In an office made up of fewer than a dozen agents, with Nora being the most senior based on both tenure and performance, it was honestly impressive. "She doesn't bother you?" Kelsey's voice was almost exasperated, like she was throwing chum into a shark tank and couldn't believe the lackluster results. "It seems like she just wants to do her work and go home." Maybe Gray did sometimes wonder what Nora was like outside of work, but she wasn't going to admit that to Kelsey, the office gossip of all people. The indignant huff Kelsey let out made it hard for Gray to keep a straight face, but she managed. Barely. "Fine, you don't want to do this? I get it. Will you at least tell me if she's batshit crazy on the trip? I don't think any of us have ever spent time outside of work with her except Cynthia." It was the first time Gray had really considered the reality of her situation. She'd be spending almost a week with Nora, and it wouldn't be about work. She'd see more of her austere colleague than she, or probably anyone else in the company, ever would. A quick pang of guilt sluiced through her that she was even going. It seemed like Nora liked her privacy, and Gray's mere presence had thrown a colossal wrench into that aspect of her vacation. No wonder she'd followed Cynthia into her office. The trip was never billed as a group vacation, and Gray had been just as surprised as Nora when it was announced she'd also won. Of course, she didn't feel badly enough to give up the trip. That would be idiotic. She'd go and give Nora all the space a 20-square-mile island could provide. Maybe they'd have a few nice conversations. Maybe they wouldn't. At worst, she'd get a fantastic end-of-summer tan to pull her through winter and knock a novel or two off her ever-growing to-be-read pile of books. At best, she'd finally know more about Nora the person, instead of Nora the kick-ass real estate agent. It was easy to be intimidated by her, and maybe Nora liked that. Top dog in the office, unapproachable, focused and dedicated. Peeling back the layers would prove what Gray already knew, even if Nora didn't want her to see it. That she was just a person, with regular problems and frustrations and hang-ups like anyone else. If, for some reason, it was important for Nora to keep up that facade for some semblance of self-protection and control, Gray would be fine with it. And really, it wasn't like they'd be trapped together. In the logistical sense, traveling with Nora was exactly like Gray had expected it would be. She'd shown up at the gate an hour before boarding was set to begin, and Nora was already there. What she hadn't expected was that Nora would be wearing a soft-looking pair of black joggers.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?